Hello, and welcome to Starbound. My name is I Am Duck, and I'll be your narrator. If you enjoy human-created HFY stories and want to support us, we're on Patreon now. You'll also get access to exclusive stories you won't hear anywhere else. Link is in the description. Now let's get into it. It was a difficult problem. Blylix had pulled some strings with these government agencies, and his request to visit Earth had been approved by the most important councils on his species' side. Yet the last government institution responsible for the safety of their citizens when visiting other planets had barred his entry to the human world, and now they were requesting that humanity produce a list. This list had to contain everything on Earth that could kill them. What made it worse was that Blylix himself had to meet with the human ambassador to demand it. The reason was simple. Almost no one from his species ever visited Earth, and the government was not about to assign someone to the role, given how little demand there was to travel to a death world like Earth. And so here he stood, alone, in a corridor of the Galactic Diplomatic Station, orbiting Neutral Point 7, staring at a door. Just a door. Brushed composite alloy, standard diplomatic grey, with a small display panel beside it that read Conference Suite 11C, reserved. Behind that door sat a human being, and Blylix could not make his legs move. He shifted his weight from one limb to the other, a subtle rocking motion that would have been imperceptible to most species, but that he could feel all the way through his translucent pink body. His legs, if they could be called that, two pillars of dense gelatin tapering to wide bases, made a faint wet sound on the floor each time he adjusted his stance. His three-fingered hands hung at his sides, their boneless digits curling and uncurling. Human smiled. This was the reason behind his hesitation. Blylix had studied human social cues extensively in preparation for this meeting. He knew intellectually that a smile was a gesture of goodwill, but millions of years of evolutionary instinct were hard to overwrite with a few hours of reading. And every fibre of his soft body screamed that a creature showing its teeth was about to bite. And it wasn't just the smiling, it was everything about them. Humans were rigid, their bodies were built on a framework of calcified internal supports. Bones, they called them, wrapped in dense muscle fibre that could exert terrifying force. They had forward-facing eyes, predator eyes, hunter eyes, eyes that said, "I see you, and I can reach you." Their skin was thick and opaque, hiding whatever went on beneath. Even the way they walked upright, balanced on two sturdy legs with joints that locked into place, radiated a kind of confidence that Blylix found deeply unsettling. He caught a glimpse of himself in the reflective surface of the corridor wall and winced. He was no prize either, he supposed. His body was a translucent column of layered pink tissue, vaguely bipedal, with two stumpy legs and a torso that tapered upward to a head that was less a head and more a slightly wider portion of the same gelatinous mass. His face, such as it was, consisted of two dark eye spots set at marginally different heights on either side of a central ridge, with a feeding slit below that could stretch open alarmingly wide when he ate, but otherwise remained a thin line. There was a softness to his entire form, a visible wobble when he moved, that made him look as though he might collapse at any moment. He knew humans found his kind unsettling, in their own way. The asymmetry, the translucence through which his internal organs were visible, the way his surface rippled when he breathed. Two species, each quietly horrified by the other's existence, and now he had to walk into a room and make polite conversation with one. Blylix swallowed, or performed the action his species used in place of swallowing, a contraction of the upper digestive cavity. He had to do this, not just for his government, not for the absurd bureaucratic checklist that had brought him here, but for himself, for them. His parents had died on Earth nearly 100 human years ago. Their ship had gone down somewhere on that deadly planet, and Blylix had spent his entire adult life assembling the paperwork, the permissions, the approvals, and the political favors necessary to visit the site. He had not come this far to be stopped by a door and the teeth behind it. He pressed his palm against the entry panel. The door slid open. The room beyond was smaller than he expected. Neutral lighting, the walls were calm beige, and everything was unremarkable. And there on the far side of the table sat the human. Blylix's eye spots widened involuntarily, the dark patches spreading across his facial tissue as they tried to take in every detail at once. The human was old, at least by human standards. Deep lines carved across her face, the colour of dried clay. The hair on his head was white, not the translucent white of age in Blylix's species, but a solid, opaque white. He wore a dark suit of some kind, formal by human standards. And his hands rested calmly on either side of a pile of papers on the table before him. Paper. Actual physical paper, pressed flat and stacked in a neat column that rose a good 15 centimeters above the table surface. Blylix stared at it. He hadn't seen physical paper outside of a museum. And then the human smiled. It happened slowly, which somehow made it worse. The corners of the human's mouth drew upward, pulling the skin of his cheeks into those deep creases. Blylix's every instinct told him to back away from the door. His higher cognitive functions wrestling with those instincts like a handler grappling a spooked animal, forced him to take a step forward instead. Then another. Then another. "Please," the human said, "have a seat." Blylix approached the table and looked down at the chair. It was not a standard diplomatic issue chair. Standard chairs were rigid, flat-surfaced things designed for species with internal skeletons. This one was different. It was wide and shallow. More of a padded cradle than a seat, with gently curved sides that would support a body without a fixed frame. Someone had thought about what his body needed and provided it. He also noticed, as he lowered himself carefully into the seat, that his body felt lighter than it should have. The station's standard gravity was set to the galactic medium, which was already kinder than Earth's crushing pull. But this room had been adjusted further. Quite thoughtful. He said nothing about any of this, but he noticed. And something very small shifted in his assessment of the creature sitting across from him. "My name is Oliver Brown," the human said, leaning forward. "I'm the Earth Diplomatic Liaison to the Galactic Council. I've been assigned to address your government's request." He paused, and the smile shifted into something more complicated. "And I want to start by saying, with the greatest respect to your institutions, that I think we both know this request is a little unusual." Blylix's translator implant worked quickly, converting the human's spoken language into the harmonic tones of his native speech, feeding them directly into his auditory processing centers. He heard every word clearly, including the careful diplomatic understatement in the last sentence. "No offense intended," Oliver Brown continued, and he held up one hand in placating gesture that looked entirely natural on him, as though he'd spent a lifetime softening hard truths. "But I've reviewed the biological specifications of your species quite thoroughly in preparation for this meeting, and I want to be straightforward with you. Your people are, and again I mean no disrespect, among the most physically vulnerable sapient species in the known galaxy. You have no skeletal structure, no calcified protective plating, no venom, no natural armor of any kind. Your bodies are composed almost entirely of soft tissue. You are, if I may use a human colloquialism that I promise is purely descriptive, essentially a very sophisticated and extremely intelligent blob." He said the word with obvious discomfort, as though he regretted it the moment it left his mouth, but had committed to honesty and couldn't take it back. The human continued. "A blob that, importantly, cannot be considered truly formless. You have defined anatomy, organs, structural integrity, which means that you can be damaged if sufficient force is applied. You will not simply reform, you will break. Oliver Brown paused, studied Blilix's expression, or attempted to, since reading emotion on a largely translucent gelatinous face was presumably challenging, and then pressed forward. So when your government asks us to compile a comprehensive list of everything on Earth that could kill a member of your species, he said, and now the complicated smile returned, I think you can understand why my team found the request daunting. Which brings me to my real question. He folded his hands together on the table. Why do you want to go to Earth? Genuinely. I'm not asking as a diplomat. I'm asking because I'd like to understand. Do you know why the other species classified our planet as a Category 13 death world? The words lingered in the air between them, and Blilix sat in his perfectly chosen chair in his carefully adjusted gravity, across from this terrifying, thoughtful old predator who had prepared for his visit with more care than his own government had shown, and he took a long, slow moment to process all of it. A Category 13 death world, the highest classification on the galactic danger scale, a planet where the dominant species had evolved by outrunning, outsmarting, and outfighting every other predator in an ecosystem so aggressively hostile that it produced new ways to kill things faster than the galactic database could catalogue them. Earth was a world with corrosive oceans, a radioactive sun, tectonic instability, atmospheric electrical discharges, and a biosphere in which nearly every organism was engaged in an endless multi-front war of consumption. He knew all of it, and none of it mattered. Blilix clenched his fists, softly, uselessly, and he spoke. My parents died on Earth, he said, and his voice, translated into human language by the same implant that fed him Oliver Brown's words, came out steady and clear. The ship crashed on the surface nearly 100 of your years ago. I don't know exactly what happened. The records are fragmentary, and my government classified most of the details decades before I was born. What I know is where they went down. I have coordinates, and I want to stand in that place. He paused, and the silence in the room was absolute. I know the risks, he continued. I know what Earth is. I know that your gravity alone could collapse my internal structure if my environmental suit fails. I know that your atmosphere contains compounds that would dissolve my outer membrane. He let out a sound that his species used in place of a bitter laugh. I need closure, Ambassador Brown. I've spent my entire adult life trying to get to that place, and the last obstacle in my path is my own government safety bureau, which will not issue my travel permit without this list. He looked down at his hands, at the 3 soft fingers of each curling against his palms. I'm sorry, he said. I know the request is absurd. I didn't write it. I didn't want to come here and waste your time with it. If it were up to me, I'd skip the list entirely and take my chances. He looked up again, meeting those grey predator eyes as squarely as he could. I don't need a list to tell me what I already know. Everything on Earth can kill me. He let the joke land softly, a small offering of levity across the vast gap between their species. Oliver Brown stared at him. For a long, uncomfortable moment, the human ambassador said nothing. Well, Oliver Brown said finally, and his voice was different now, quieter, stripped of its diplomatic polish. That was not what I expected to hear today. He reached across the table and placed both hands on the tall stack of paper that had been sitting in front of him since Blilix entered the room. With a careful motion, he slid the entire pile across the table's surface toward Blilix. My team prepared this, he said. When your government's request came through, we took it as, well, honestly, we took it as a joke. The kind of absurdist humor that sometimes comes out of interspecies bureaucracy. So we responded in kind. He nodded toward the pile. Take a look. Blilix reached out with both hands and drew the stack of paper toward him. It was heavy, heavier than he expected, and he had to brace his arms against the table to manage the weight. The top sheet was covered in dense rows of text in the human script, angular black marks on white that meant nothing to his eye spots until his translator implant engaged. There was a brief flicker as the implant's optical overlay activated, scanning the human characters and projecting their translated equivalents in glowing Vielix script directly onto his visual field. The first entry read, Acacia Thorns. Below it, Acid Rain, then Aconite, then Adders, then African Wild Dogs. It went on and on. Blilex's eye spots moved down the page. Alligators, altitude sickness, ammonia, amoebic dysentery, anaphylactic shock, anthrax, anthills, arsenic, asbestos, asp vipers, asteroid impacts, atmospheric pressure changes, avalanches, avocados. He blinked. He turned the page. The second page continued. Still the letter A. More entries. Dozens of them, each one a thing on Earth that could kill him, rendered in tidy human script and dutifully translated by his implant. He turned another page. Still A. His hands moved to the bottom of the stack. He pulled out the very last page. Page 100, he noted and scanned it. Azurite dust, azure-winged magpie talons, in rare defensive scenarios. Page 100, still the letter A. 100 pages, and the humans had not yet reached the letter B. The sound that escaped Blilex was not something his species typically produced in formal diplomatic settings. It started as a flutter of his feeding slit, and then deepened into a resonant vibration that rolled through his entire body. He was laughing harder than he had laughed in years, the sound of it wet and strange and utterly alien in this quiet beige room, and he could not stop. Yuma, he managed, when the vibrations finally subsided enough for his translator to function. Is extraordinary. Oliver Brown was grinning, a full, unrestrained grin that showed every one of his aged teeth. And for the first time since Blilex had walked into this room, the sight of those teeth did not frighten him. I honestly didn't think you'd get it, the ambassador said, leaning back in his chair with visible delight. Most species just get offended. His grin softened into something warmer. But you know what? I think I want to help you. With your visit, I mean. Not just the list. He tapped the stack of paper with one finger. Do you think your Government Safety Bureau might give you the green light if you handed them this? Blilex looked at the pile, 100 pages of everything starting with A, an official document prepared by the Human Diplomatic Mission, stamped and formatted and real. It's versatile, he said slowly. The people in the Safety Bureau are not known for their thoroughness in reviewing documents. I suspect that as long as it carries the official Earth's diplomatic seal, they will accept it without reading a single page. Then let's make it official, Oliver Brown said. He pushed his chair back from the table and stood, and standing, he was tall. So much taller than Blilex had expected. A towering column of bone and muscle and confident posture that cast a shadow across the table. He extended one hand across the gap between them, palm open, fingers spread. I'll do my best to make the trip safe for you, and I promise you won't have to deal with any bureaucratic nonsense on our end. Earth will welcome you. Blilex stared at the offered hand. He knew what a handshake was. He had studied it. Two individuals grasping each other's manipulatory appendages and applying pressure. A gesture of trust, of agreement, of alliance. For humans it was routine. For him it meant placing his soft, boneless fingers into the grip of a creature that could crush them to pulp without effort. He hesitated. The moment stretched. He could feel the old fear rising in his chest, the instinctive animal terror of the predator's grasp. Then he reached out and took Oliver Brown's hand. The human's grip was gentle, and he marveled at the restraint contained in those strong fingers. Thank you, Blilex said quietly. Thank you, Oliver Brown replied, and released his hand. Blilex gathered the 100 pages of the letter A from the table, tucked them carefully against his body, and walked out of Conference Suite 11C feeling something he had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Fragile and translucent and trembling like everything about him, but there nonetheless. 1 month had passed. Blilek stood in the central cabin of his personal ship, a small ovoid vessel called the Quiet Meridian, and tried to steady his breathing. Through the curved viewport above the navigation console, Earth filled his entire field of vision. It was blue. "Pilot Blileks," said the ship's AI. "Pre-disembarkation safety guidelines. Please confirm readiness to begin checklist." "Confirmed," Blilek said, straightening up. "Item 1, full body environmental suit integrity. Please perform visual inspection of all outer seams, beginning with lower limb junctions." Blilek looked down at himself. The suit was impressive, a flexible, semi-rigid exoskeletal shell that encased his entire body from the base of his legs to the crown of his head. It was designed for hostile environments, and Earth qualified in every category. The outer layer was a pale silver composite that reflected excess radiation. Beneath that, a network of microhydraulic actuators provided mechanical assistance to his movements, compensating for gravity differentials of up to 300% above his homeworld standard. Beneath that, a temperature regulation membrane maintained his core at optimal levels regardless of external conditions. And beneath everything, pressed directly against his skin, a thin biomonitor mesh tracked every vital sign his body produced and fed the data to the AI in real time. He ran his hands along the lower limb junctions, the seams where the suit met his leg bases, and found them sealed, smooth, unbroken. "Lower limb junction secure," he reported. "Item 2, torso plating articulation. Please flex laterally and confirm full range of motion." "Full range confirmed." This went on for a while, and when he finished, he walked through the narrow corridor of the Quiet Meridian. The main hatch was at the rear of the vessel, a heavy circular door that currently showed a status light of solid amber, sealed, pressurized, with a planet's worth of alien atmosphere on the other side. He stepped in front of it and placed one hand against its cold surface. "Open it," he said. "Confirming external atmosphere nitrogen-oxygen mix, 78 to 21% ratio with trace gases. Conditions are within suit operational parameters. Opening hatch." The amber light turned green. There was deep mechanical noise as the locking bolts retracted, and then the hatch split along its center line and swung outward, and Blilek was hit by the full sensory weight of an alien world. Light. So much light. The planet's star, Sol, the humans called it, hung in a sky that was not just blue, but a deep, aching, saturated blue that seemed to go on forever. He took one step onto the deployment ramp, and the gravity hit him. Even with the actuators firing at full capacity, the difference was immediate and brutal. His body, accustomed to the gentle pull of his homeworld, sagged inside the suit, as though invisible hands were pressing down on every square centimeter of his tissue. His legs adjusted, the hydraulics whining, and he found his balance. But the sensation of weight, of being pulled downward, was profoundly uncomfortable. "Advisory," the AI said calmly in his ear. "Solar radiation at current landing site exceeds safe exposure limits for your dermal tissue by a factor of 4. Visor UV filtration has been automatically engaged. Your current exposure risk with suit sealed is 0. Maintain seal integrity." His visor darkened, and the harsh white gold light softened to something more tolerable. He blinked, adjusted, and looked out at Earth. He was standing on a flat clearing at the base of a range of green mountains. The Quiet Meridian sat behind him on a designated landing pad. A simple concrete platform that looked absurdly small against the landscape. Grass. There was grass everywhere, an endless carpet of green. It was beautiful. It was absolutely terrifying. And standing at the edge of the landing pad, hands in the pockets of a simple brown jacket, was Oliver Brown. Blilek stopped mid-ramp, his eye spots widening behind his visors. "Ambassador," he said, and his translator broadcast the word across the clearing. Oliver Brown smiled, that same old smile, teeth and all, and raised one hand in greeting. "Blilek, welcome to Earth." "I did not expect you to be here," Blilek managed, making his way carefully down the rest of the ramp. Each step was an exercise in controlled descent, his suit compensating for the gravity with every movement. "I'm no one important. I assumed Zev would be a ground officer, perhaps a basic security escort. I'm not here because anyone told me to be," Oliver Brown said simply. He walked forward to meet Blilix at the base of the ramp, moving with the gravity-native ease that made the planet's pull look like nothing at all. "I'm here because I wanted to be. I told my office I was taking a personal day." Something tightened in Blilix's chest that had nothing to do with the gravity. "Thank you," he said quietly. They stood for a moment in the warm, strange, too bright air of a death world, and then Blilix spoke again. "Could you show me where they died?" Oliver Brown's expression shifted. The smile didn't disappear, but it changed, became something more solemn, more careful. He nodded once. "It's up the mountain," he said. "About an hour's walk. Are you up for it?" Blilix looked at the mountain rising above the tree line, its green flanks climbing steeply toward a rounded summit that disappeared into a wisp of cloud. An hour's walk, on Earth, in this gravity. "Yes," he said. They began to climb. The path was narrow and well-maintained, a ribbon of packed earth that wound upward through the trees in long, gentle switchbacks. On either side the forest pressed close, towering trunks of rough bark draped in climbing plants, their canopies forming a broken ceiling through which columns of golden light fell in shifting beams. The undergrowth was dense, a tangle of ferns and low bushes and flowering plants in colors Blilix had no names for. Small creatures moved in the periphery of his vision, darting between branches, rustling in the leaf litter, producing an endless background chorus that his translator couldn't pass because they weren't language, just life going about its business. Oliver Brown walked ahead, his long strides eating the incline. His boots crunched on the packed earth in a steady rhythm. He breathed evenly. "Beautiful day for it," the ambassador remarked over his shoulder, gesturing at the canopy. "This region gets a lot of rain, but we timed your visit for the dry season. The forest looks different in the wet months. Greener, if you can believe it. More waterfalls." "It is very green," Blilix said carefully, forcing his voice to remain steady. His suit's actuators were working hard now, the hydraulics firing with every step as he drove his heavy, gravity-burdened body upward along the path. The incline was modest by human standards, perhaps 15 degrees, but to him it felt like scaling a wall. His biomonitor was feeding him a steady stream of warnings: elevated cardiac output, rising core temperature. He dismissed them all. They climbed, the path grew steeper, the trees grew taller, their trunks thicker, their shade deeper. Blilix's breathing became labored. His legs trembled inside the suit. The actuators compensated, but there were limits to what machinery could do when the organism inside it was simply not built for this world. He stopped. He didn't mean to stop. His body simply refused to continue. His legs locked, his torso sagged, and he stood in the mountain path. Oliver Brown, who had been several meters ahead, turned back. His expression changed immediately. Concern. "Blilix!" He was back down the path in moments. "I'm sorry. I wasn't watching the pace. I should have been more careful." "Here." He extended one hand, palm up, steady as stone. "Let me help." Blilix looked at the offered hand. He thought about his trembling legs, his gasping breath, the absurdity of a gelatinous blob trying to climb a mountain on a death world. He thought about how pathetic he must look. But he took the hand. Oliver Brown's grip was the same as before, gentle. But this time, Blilix also felt the strength behind it. A solid, unshakable anchor that took a portion of his weight and held it without effort. "Thank you," Blilix said, and meant it in more ways than one. The rest of the climb was easier. Oliver Brown matched his pace exactly. One hand supporting Blilix's arm, the other occasionally pointing out a stable foothold or a smoother stretch of path. The suit's actuators worked in tandem, with the human's steady pull, and together they ascended. The trees thinned, the canopy opened, the light brightened, and then they reached the top, and Blilix stopped breathing. The summit was a broad, flat plateau of close-cropped grass surrounded by a low stone wall. Beyond the wall, the mountain fell away on all sides into a vast panorama of green valleys and distant peaks, and the horizon stretched so far that Blilux could see the gentle curve of the planet itself at the edges of his vision. Wind moved across the plateau in steady waves, bending the grass. But he saw none of this. Not really, because in the center of the plateau, arranged with a care, were the remains of his parents' ship. The wreckage had been cleaned, restored, and mounted on a series of low stone pedestals that raised it just above the grass. The hull fragments, twisted, scorched, still bearing the faded markings of the Felix Transit Authority, had been arranged not as a pile of debris, but as a kind of sculpture, each piece positioned in relation to the others to suggest the shape of the ship as it had once been. The largest section, a curved plate that had been part of the port hull, stood upright, like a sail. Blilux's eye spots moved from piece to piece, absorbing every detail. The care, the attention, the fact that someone, many someones over many years, had maintained this site, had kept it cleaned, had treated these broken pieces of alien metal as something worth preserving. And beyond the wreckage, set into the hillside at the far edge of the plateau, stood a monument. It was large, 3 meters tall at least, carved from a single block of pale marble. Its surface was smooth and cut deep into that surface. In letters that Blilux's translator overlay processed and rendered in glowing Felix script were words. He walked toward it. His legs were trembling, but not from exhaustion now. He stopped before the marble face, and he read. In this place, on the 10th day of the 3rd month of the year 2127, by our calendar, a vessel of the Felix people came to rest upon the earth. Aboard were 2 travellers, Calorix and Sundara, of the Felix homeworld, who did not survive the landing. We mourn their loss and honour their memory. Though they did not intend it, so they could not have known, their arrival brought our world the first warp core ever to reach Earth's surface, a gift of possibilities that the Galactic Council had never seen fit to grant our planet, for our world was deemed too dangerous, too wild, too deadly to deserve the stars. Humanity does not forget. With the knowledge salvaged from our vessel, we built our first fastest and light engine within a generation, and we rose through our death world to take our place among the stars. To Calorix and Sandara, you gave us the universe. Blilux could not move. His body stood rigid against its silver suit, every system nominal, every reading green, and he could not move. The words hung in his vision, glowing in Felix script, and he read them again and again and again. His parents, Calorix and Sundara, their names carved in human stone, on a human mountain, on a death world that had taken their lives, and then, incredibly, had thanked them for it. He felt a hand on his shoulder, heavy, warm, impossibly gentle. Your parents are important to us, Oliver Brown said quietly, standing beside him. Every child on Earth learns their names. Every one of us knows what they gave us, even if they never meant to give it. He paused. We've been waiting a long time for someone to come looking for them. Blilux said nothing. He stood on the mountaintop, in the gravity that was trying to crush him, under the sun that would kill him, on a world where everything from anthills to avocados could end his life, and he stared at the monument and said nothing for a long moment. The wind moved across the plateau. The fragments of his parents' ship whispered their songs. The marble words glowed in his vision. Finally, he turned to the ambassador. Thank you, he said. His voice was steady, though the rest of him was not. I would like to return to my ship now. Oliver Brown nodded. Did you find what you were looking for? Blilux looked back at the monument one last time, at the names, at the stone, at the carefully tended wreckage of a ship that had carried 2 travelers to a world they never meant to visit and changed the course of an entire civilization. I got more than what I looked for, he said. They descended the mountain together, the human steady hand guiding him down the path, through the trees, through the golden light, through the alien air of a world that was beautiful and terrible. Blilix climbed the ramp of the quiet meridian, stepped through the hatch, and sealed the door behind him. He stood in his cabin, alone, and he thought about his parents, about Calorix and Sundara, who had crashed on a death world and died far from home, and who had, without knowing it, without intending it, given entire species the stars. Their tragedy had not been for nothing. He closed his eyes and begun the launch sequence for home.